Because the parallel you come up with, and we keep getting back to kind of Edwardian or late Victorian Britain, is that America should try to be Bismarck. That is like the German Chancellor who acted as an honest broker between the various competing powers of Europe. And America should try that role rather than the role the British Empire was trying in its later phase of getting drawn into more or less every conflict everywhere, the Boer War, where it got sucked into internal disputes in really quite tiny little African Boer republics.
Precisely. I do worry when I look at the United States in Iraq that, you know, the United States is now trying to settle disputes between Shiites and Sunnis about which neighborhood in Baghdad should be Shiite and which should be Sunni. And it reminds me of the British Empire fighting, you know, a back-breaking war with the Boer War, where they were really sorting out the constitutional arrangements of Dutch farmers. And meanwhile, the big story was the rise of Germany at the center of Europe and the way it was altering the balance of power. I feel like the United States needs to get out of the 8th century AD in Baghdad and into the 21st century where India and China and Brazil are reshaping the world.
Because one of the things that surprises me, I mean, you talk about it should be addressing the rising powers, but you're quite sanguine about the economic rise of China and India and possibly places like Brazil as well. You think that America still has the economic wherewithal to stay there, despite these much more populous countries enriching themselves very rapidly. Now why is that?
Well, if you look at the last 50 or 60 years, you know, globalization is not an entirely new phenomenon. We're experiencing a kind of whole different phase of it. But as other countries have entered the global economy, it has meant the global economy has done better, it has grown more. And countries like the United States and Britain have had to move up the value chain, have to find new things that they can do that are more complicated, perhaps more in the services than in manufacturing. That is a drive towards specialization that Adam Smith and David Ricardo talked about hundreds of years ago. We can do that. That's fine. And you will find places along the value chain for Britain and the United States to sit very comfortably. The great danger, I think, is when we look at this new world, we try to fight it. We get scared by it. Because you know what? First of all, you can't stop it. It's going to, you know, hundreds of millions of Indian and Chinese are on the move, and that isn't going to change. But what you can do is you can scare yourselves and close yourselves in and become protectionist and get scared of immigrants. You know, that would be exactly the opposite response. What you really should do is embrace it and ride the wave, recognizing that this is a world with more challenges. But actually, we can do very well if we ride the wave. These countries are not 10 feet tall. They're going to do well, but we'll do well as well.
And you talk, again, it's one of the surprise elements in your prescription here for the future, is that countries shouldn't be afraid of immigration. You identify immigration as a huge factor in America's success. I mean, the huge internal debate in America in the elections now, I suppose, about that. There's a huge internal debate in Britain about immigration. But you think it's a good thing, it should be embraced.
Well, if you look at the American economy over the last 25 years, without immigration, America would have grown just as fast as France. And as you can imagine, French growth rates are the object of some ridicule in the United States generally. If you look at London, London is so dynamic, so mobile, flexible, largely because of immigration. There are problems it raises. I don't minimize them. There are cultural adjustments and things like that. But if you look at the societies that are thriving in the world, whether they're cities or countries, they're thriving because of immigration, because you have in the infusion of talent and hunger and energy. And then if you look at the very top end, you know, a third of all startups in Silicon Valley are started by immigrants. A third of all Nobel Prizes won in the United States in the last century were won by immigrants. The reality is, if you want to do real science and scientific research in the United States, 50% of the science labs in America are staffed by the foreign students or immigrants. So if we are going to move up the value chain, the only way we can do it is with immigrants and by making America, keeping America an attractive place. I think that it is sad that America and London and Britain are having this debate, because we're actually unique in the world in being able to handle immigration. You know, look at the other countries in the world. Look at Japan, look at even France or Italy. They're utterly unable to deal with immigrants. They push them off into the suburbs. They become ghettoized, sullen, radicalized, or they don't take them in at all, as in Japan, and they as a result, the economy starts slowing into a kind of predictable demographic decline. So this is a great strength of Anglo-American societies, that we find a way to assimilate people. and yet we're turning our backs on one of our great strengths.
Now, this is a book about the future of America, and naturally you don't cover what I'm about to ask you about, which is what do smaller countries like ours do in this world where there are great powers moving around like icebergs and we have to sort of bob along in their wake? What's the optimum strategy for us?
Well, you know, I've always thought that that Britain is actually an extraordinary example of a country that has reinvented itself over the last 20 or 30 years. It has become, I think, a country that is not one of the greatest powers in the world in terms of the size, but it is without question one of the most influential countries in the world, with a city that has probably become the world's financial center, London, with a dynamism and energy that is quite enviable. Look, as an American, I hope that what Britain will do is to recognize that the Anglo-American partnership is unique and that Britain gets an enormous amount from being part of this extraordinary order that it helped create, a kind of Anglo-American order that we are now hoping to draw China and India into. And so I hope that we'll be a country that feels at the end of the day, with all the troubles, America is better to be with America, criticizing it when you feel is appropriate, but at the same time, at the end of the day, still a partner.
We'll have to wait and see what you write in the next volume. I think Zakaria, thanks very much indeed for joining us.
It's my pleasure.
And Book Talk will be back again next week. Join us then.